welcome to the NACRC's second session during our career chat series. And this month's series is focused on individuals who are in the field of fitness, wellness, physical therapy, all those things. So our first speaker today we have is Sean Anderson, who studied exercise science as an undergraduate student and is now pursuing a doctorate in physical therapy. So I will pass it over to Sean if you could just kind of introduce yourself to us and briefly share how you got started in all this.
Yeah, cool. Thank you to Sean. I appreciate you having me. My name is Sean. I'm a second year physical therapy student at the Northern Arizona University in the Flagstaff campus. Currently, I'm doing my capstone project on long-term exercise adherence and kind of the factors that contribute to, people who exercise their entire life and kind of reap those benefits of having a movement-filled life through the entire lifespan. On more of a fun note, I enjoy snowboarding at Arizona Snow Bowl. We're currently getting a lot of good snow, so I'm a happy snowboarder.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. I've actually never done snowboarding, and I've lived in 2 cities now that do stuff like that, and I don't.
Oh, man. It's a good time.
I need to. Thank you. So kind of tell us maybe like why you chose this path. How did you start with, your undergrad in exercise science and now doing like PT? Like what first kind of sparked that interest for you?
Yeah, it's funny to think about that question because I think as my knowledge developed in the field, my why did also, which is a good thing, right? Because then I just kind of found more and more reasons that I was into it. But I think initially when I was in high school, I had a personal transformation where I kind of went from a very inactive, chubby freshman kid who was really shy, not involved, to joining the wrestling team and learning how to eat well and lift well. And they really taught us, how to pursue, an athletic physique, body, whatever you want to go about it, however you want to go about it. And that change that I experienced was really something that meant a lot to me. And I saw a lot of, benefit to it that I wanted to share it with others. And so when I was looking at careers, I definitely looked at like personal training and physical therapy. And I found that physical therapy kind of aligned more with my interest in the field in a direction that I wanted to take it.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So it sounds like it came from more of like a personal experience with this, and you really wanted to kind of like give that back in a valuable way to other people, right?
Yeah, definitely. It just, when I compared myself from like that individual who like wasn't exercising and not involved, the change was very inspiring. I felt like a lot of people could benefit from that. And I kind of saw physical therapy as the means to connect with people on that level. And now that I'm studying it in to the degree which I am, I'm more excited with that like connection to people. And I really now understand that I was really on the right path as a kid, that there's some serious benefit here. And there's been a lot of progress, I think, in the exercise world that kind of demonstrates the value of that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I don't work out too much or exercise too much, but I do find value when I, move my body or go walking. I
Yeah.
specifically really enjoy dance classes, like dance workout classes, Zumba, all of those like cardio classes. So I really, really enjoy those.
Yeah. And that's awesome. And I think that's kind of a misconception, is that like these activities are limited to going to the gym and running on a treadmill, which is so boring, like for anybody. And I know they try to put TVs on there, but those don't help at all either. And now in my capstone project that I mentioned earlier, you're kind of learning that like having dance, which has like a social circle around it, and maybe even like touches your heart. I mean, you're playing music that I hope, you're allowing to flow through you and express, that you do reap the benefits of that. And it doesn't have to be, going to the gym to get exercise.
Yeah, totally. When I was in undergrad, I did a lot of dance classes, and at the end of class, our instructors would like make us all huddle and put our hands in and
Yeah.
hey, go team, or we'd have like a word of the day and it'd be like confidence, and they would really encourage us to like take how we're feeling in that moment and like spread it to the rest of our days and the rest of our
Yeah,
weeks.
that's great. I'm
I know.
happy they did that. That's awesome. That's the stuff I think that really makes it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So you talked about, you had this personal experience that kind of like got you interested in this. How did you kind of explore what the schooling looked like for you? So like, how did you explore like what programs you needed to go into? And was there anyone who kind of helped you along that way?
Yeah. So I would say, first of all, my mom helped me because she was kind of the instigator of that thinking, right? She was like, well, what are you going to go to college for? What do you want to do? So I'm absolutely thankful for her for that opportunity. But then also one of my coaches in high school who was an athletic trainer. So he had pursued and known the field better than anyone I had met before. And he was kind of the one that was like, well, physical therapy, this is what you should expect. And it's a lot of education. And so he really informed me more on kind of that path and where that path led. But then at the same time, I did a lot of reading on my own on Google, just Googling like physical therapy as a career. Reddit too. Reddit was a really good, um, I would say, community that I could post on as like an 18-year-old kid with like no confidence and get replies from professionals that were, just on Reddit also. And that was a really good tool to use also. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. I think that's awesome. And I think that's something we really encourage our students to do as well, is to really, well, one, do some research on their own. And, we kind of help them show how to do those research and like how to find things online, but also to connecting with someone who is already in that field. I know that was a thing for me. I've always kind of been in like education, which is not fitness related, but I've always sought out people who are, teachers or social workers or counselors,
Mm-hmm.
mentored them. And throughout college, I had a mentor who is in student affairs, which is what I'm doing now. And like you said, those were like very, very influential and like helpful people, part of the process. But then also just to see that like there's so many different paths that you can take. For example, like with you doing your physical therapy and stuff, and like from exercise science and how you can go about those routes. Because there's some people who probably do individual training or like those kind of like group fitness classes. So
Yeah.
glad that you're here and we can show students all the different paths that you can take, and it's
Yeah.
not one size fit all for
And
everyone.
there's a lot really when you kind of not only break it down from like, personal trainer, physical therapist, those two paths, but like nutritionist, um, you know, the medical field in general has a lot of ways that like if you're interested in helping people, you can do that in many, many ways. And I think you should explore those and kind of find one that fits your personality. But I like what you said about having a mentor because um, one thing that I think the physical therapy field did well for me was they encouraged that I shadow in undergrad, which I think is a super unutilized tool for undergraduates to connect. Like the fact that you're just a student and you're interested is pretty much your foot in the door for any business. And that's outside of like physical therapy. And you said education. Like if you approach someone who's a professional in the field you're interested in and you say like, hey, I'm a student, can you please tell me about what you're doing? I guarantee they'll be more than excited to share and help with you because a lot of these professionals are proud of their skills and want to share and they're very passionate about it. So I'm glad you mentioned that because finding people as a student is probably the easiest time to
Mhm.
find them. Yeah.
It really is. And there's something that I was always told for my field, is that like people like talking about themselves and what they do.
Yeah, it's true though. It is so true.
So yeah, I've always learned that. Could you talk a little bit about maybe a little bit about your undergraduate experience in your exercise science program?
Yeah, sure. I thought it was a really good experience. I'm not sure what aspect you want me to go into detail about just in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. The way that I was introduced to exercise science versus maybe the fitness wellness path was that my advisor mentioned that exercise science is just that in the title, more about the science and the biology, physiology, those kind of classes. You take chemistry, organic chemistry. Whereas fitness is in wellness, I believe, is more policy and kind of the general picture. People go into that, you know, they do become personal trainers. Maybe they work in public health, other things like that. And so that appealed to me, and it has held true that it is very science heavy. It was a big change for me going from high school to undergrad, where I was studying a lot. I really did study a lot in undergrad, and I still study a lot. So I think exercise science is a great degree, but just be prepared that it is very science heavy. You know, it's basically a pre-med degree.
Mm-hmm.
I found it a little tough because I also found myself in a position where I needed to work in undergrad, which is very challenging to be. It's a challenging time in your life if you have to work and go to classes and kind of manage the other new adult responsibilities that you have. It can be very hard, and I struggled. And I had a terrible semester my sophomore year where I think I got like a 2.7 GPA, and I was really struggling, and I had to readjust and rebalance myself and recognize that I need to cut how much I'm spending so that the amount that I make it work is enough to cover my finances, and that I still have time to study. And so that just came with its own set of challenges, but I made it through, and now I got into my dream program, NAU, and so I'm thankful for that. But I think undergrad was a very growth development time for me, as it is most people. I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I think also thank you for touching on like the working in college aspect. That's something I did too. And it's not
It's tough.
easy,
It
but
is not tough, or it's not easy. Yep.
not easy. But sometimes it's also necessary for us to be able to like, help get some extra money on the side, or possibly already getting your foot in the door if you can like work at like a position or something that's correlated with your field. So that's really important. Thanks for also sharing just about like exercise science and like explaining that it is very sciencey. I think that's also important to note. But I think I'm also interested in hearing about how you went from your undergrad program to now your doctoral program. What was that process like?
Yeah. So I think I was lucky because I became aware of the options that my degree kind of gave me after graduation. I was aware of that early. And again, that came from the fact that after my freshman year, I was interested in physical therapy, and I shadowed. And then I immediately got to talk to professionals, and they started telling me, here is how you do the physical therapy route. And that's where I became aware of shadowing hours, which is a huge part of a lot of health programs want you to have some background in the field, working just in offices that, it could be a chiropractor office, it could be a physical therapy office, even just like an orthopedic surgeon office. I had a friend that worked in those, or a dentist office. So just experience with that stuff. And so I found out about that early on, which I think was a big factor to why I got into this program, is because I had so many hours of observation. And so a lot of the transition was just jumping through the hoops to make a competitive application, if that makes sense, like having the GPA and knowing that the GPA was important. It'd be very unfortunate if I hadn't known that like my classes meant a lot, and then I got to senior year and I had a very below average GPA, and I went to apply. That would have been a different story. But yeah, just being prepared and making sure that I was creating it a competitive application throughout that process.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's really important to highlight too. I know that a lot of the students we work with are high school students, and they're probably not there yet, but it's also important for them to understand, like, sometimes there's next steps. And like, even for me, when I was an undergrad, I didn't necessarily plan on doing a master's program right now. But then as I got more information about like my options and like talking to people who are already in my field, I'm getting to shadow people, getting to do internships and practicums. It was like, oh, you probably have to go to grad school.
Yeah, yeah. But it's
But
good to realize that sooner than later, because
yeah.
then you can kind of, I think that's helpful in making the sacrifices that
Mhm.
you have to make to do that, because you know that there's like more to the process. So it was like when I had to make sacrifices for class, I was like kind of okay with it because I knew that this was the path that I wanted to go on.
Yeah, it's challenging. I think also, what was I gonna say? Um, I totally just lost my train of thought.
No,
Oh my
it's
God, I
okay.
lost it.
You you were touching on a really interesting aspect about what comes after
Yeah,
programs.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, a lot of times we go into college and think like, oh, I'm gonna do this degree and do this job, but like college
Yeah.
like really opens up so much opportunities that you never thought of before. And I
Hmm.
think your story definitely highlights that very well. Like starting in your exercise science, but like connecting with people, learning more, really diving into it and putting yourself into it because you get in, what you put out, which is very cliche, but it is that is
It is
basically.
true. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think that's really important. And that's really the piece of advice that I give a lot of people, um, when like they're like, how do you choose your degree and things like that. And I think you shouldn't choose a degree that is in a field you enjoy. You should find a job you enjoy and then get the degree for that job, because you want to have that opportunity after graduation. The last thing you want to do is to graduate with a very generalized degree and then be like, well, I don't really know what to do with this now. So I think it's very helpful to reach out and shadow people and kind of find jobs that you want, that then the degree you're getting is going to get you that job.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Could you explain that to us a little bit more about what your days look like now or weeks look like as a doctoral student?
Yeah, pre-COVID or currently during COVID, I think they're similar. But before we went online learning, it was basically 8 to 5 in the classroom. And so most days during the week, you start at 8 and then you go, it was variable to like 3 or 5. And then some days of the week, you're in the clinic working with patients. So applying the things that you're learning in the classroom. And that's usually about 2 days a week. Um, Sometimes you would have to go after class and go to like an off-campus clinic, because we do have an on-campus clinic at NAU. But typically, yeah, it's about like an 8 to 5 in the class, and then studying on top of that as necessary. So it's a busy day for sure.
That definitely sounds like a really long day, but I think it's awesome that you have kind of like a mixture of like in-class learning, but then also hands-on learning. And like as a grad student myself, I understand like those definitely go hand in hand, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say is your favorite part about your program right now?
My favorite part. That's tough. I gotta be careful with my words since this is. No, I think my program's done a really good job of um, introducing me to like a frame of mind that I think makes for like a very healthy critical thinker, but yet compassionate clinician. Because the way you introduce these ideas to your students in the context with which you do it, I think is very important. And I like that NAU, especially the Flagstaff campus, comes at it in a very um, compassionate way and really emphasizing the patient and their values first. And we do have the tools to help them, but remember that you're helping them and that it's like a relationship. Because I think that's very important with where healthcare is going, especially now during COVID. People are really longing for some good connection. in some good like social environment. And I think no matter how many options someone has to seek health, if you're a point of contact that is caring and helpful, you'll be successful. And I think that's something that this program has done a really good job of teaching me and really showing me too, because I feel like they care about us. It's a small cohort, so it's about 50 students, but I think they do a really good job of like making it feel like it's us and them taking on the challenge of healthcare. And that's a really powerful feeling that I hope to foster with future patients.
I really love that. Oh my gosh. I was like, whoa, motivational speaking now, but
No, it just touches me because, you know, I think people are really afraid of failure in this kind of like doctoral programs and just master's degrees and PhDs. There's a lot of stress you feel that we put on ourselves to succeed, and we put a lot of effort to get here, and now's the time. And they've just done such a good job of not taking away from that drive, but treating us in a way that, you know, motivates me to continue being driven. They're like, yes, this is hard. We're making it hard on you on purpose, but like it's for your betterment. And that just doesn't stress me out as much. You know, it makes me jazzed up. I don't know the way to say, you know?
that's good. I think because like a lot of people would associate like these types of, you know, post grad programs as like, oh my gosh, so intense and scary. So I really appreciate you for kind of clearing that up. And I have a similar experience too. Like my grad program, my master's program right now, they're very caring. It is challenging in different areas, but like
Yeah.
and why it's challenging and like how it'll help us grow. And like they show that compassion to us that we're in turn going to show to like the students that we work with. And I think you also made a good point about the social and like relationship building piece. I actually worked with a high school student earlier, and she's kind of like on the fence of like what she wants to do. And I was like, okay, let's give you some time to figure it out. Maybe let's set a goal. And her goal was to like improve her social and interpersonal skills. And because that can help her, like no matter what she decides to do, she knows that she wants to work with people. Not sure what capacity yet, but like your story really goes to show that, you know, you kind of really need those skills for no matter what you're doing, and it is
Yeah.
applicable in any field such as physical therapy. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, it's us as humans, you know, we seek that connection. And so it just transcends no matter what you're doing, hanging out with a friend, patient. Yeah, like it just is, everything is the same. Yeah.
Yeah. So before we kind of wrap up a little bit, I am curious to know how much longer you have in your program. So how long is it? But then also kind of like, I don't know, I hope this is not like a dumb question, but like, what's
No,
like
you're
the
fine.
outlook for you after your program?
The job outlook, is that what you asked? Oh, perfect. Yeah, so I graduate in December of 2021, so this year, about a year out. And so it's a 2.5 year program. So as a second year, I have like, yeah, that half year. And that's basically just clinical rotation, where I am in the clinic or in the hospital, taking on the role of a physical therapist, but under the supervision of an actually licensed physical therapist. So it's about, you do 30 weeks total. So by the time you finish those, you should be feeling pretty confident in your ability to perform that role. And in terms of the job outlook, that's a very interesting question because, you know, COVID has challenged a lot of jobs in health facilities. So I think it's promising because quarantine is a time where people were facing a lot of inactivity. And so they're coming out and they need a lot of guidance for that activity. So there's, I think, opportunity there. And it did become an essential service in Arizona. So when there's that big discussion in early March, kind of like what's essential, what's not, physical therapy did get labeled as essential. So I think it's pretty promising. And we also got our license or Practice Act, should get that down, our Practice Act extended to do telehealth visits, which means we can actually reach people over the computer now, which I think is another big opportunity for us to, you know, just have positions there.
That's so cool. I love that. I did not know that that was an essential thing and that you all are able to do telehealth. But obviously, that's really important right now with
Hmm.
being in quarantine and being at home all the time. So
Yeah.
thanks for sharing that. Couple last things. Let's say there is like a high school student right now who might be interested in exercise science, physical therapy, or just something in the broad area of like fitness, wellness, health. Kind of what would you encourage them to do right now, or like what's your biggest piece of advice for them?
Oh man. Um, we're taking a high school student who's interested in this. I would say really exploring your options and not pigeonholing yourself super early and just kind of asking yourself, okay, what is physical therapy? Why do I want to do it? What aspects of it are better than this other path? And really, if I had to give advice to any high school student, I would say just try to develop yourself as an individual and really spend this time in your final years of high school and your early years of college really developing yourself, and not just in the professional life but like in what you like to do. If you can find what makes you happy in life and then turn around and find a career that kind of works to do that, you're going to be so happy. So don't worry too much right now about finding the perfect job, because you don't really know what the perfect you is yet. So kind of work on that, and then I think you'll understand more um, about what career you want.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So that's all the time we have for now. Thanks so much, Sean, for joining us and talking about your experiences, but also providing really great advice for anyone that's interested in this. Thank you all for tuning in. Stay tuned for our next series. Okay, so this is the second part of our February career series chat. And this month's focus was on fitness, wellness, physical therapy. And today we have Dr. Michelle Stauffer, who I'll invite to introduce herself a little bit, and then we'll jump right in.
Hello, my name is, like she said, Dr. Michelle Stauffer. I am a doctor of physical therapy out here in Denver, Colorado. I also hold a certification in health wellness coaching that I do in addition and as an adjunct to my physical therapy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you for taking the time to be here with us and answering some questions and just sharing your experiences. So the first question I'd like to ask, or would like to learn more, what's kind of like a typical day look like for you?
Yeah, so in particular, there's a lot of different settings that you can find physical therapists. I happen to be currently in what's called subacute rehab, or some people know them as skilled nursing facilities. And it's really just a step down from the hospital of once people are ready and stable to leave the hospital, but they're not safe enough for whatever reason to go home, they come to my facility. So there I get in, work 8-hour days. The beautiful thing about my location, pardon me, is I can come into work at 7 a.m. if I know patients have doctor's appointments, or I can go into work at 10 a.m. if I know they've got morning appointments and won't be back in the facility until later on. But work 40-hour weeks, kind of generically 8 to 5, but that's kind of what the normal day looks like.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm curious to know, I actually didn't know that this was a thing. Well, not physical therapy, but the rehab portion of it where they can go to you before going home. So how did you get into this? How did you learn about this field? What does your journey look like?
Yeah, I was very fortunate back in high school, actually. My mother was a accountant for a small business, which did the therapy for a nursing facility. So that was my first introduction to nursing facilities and physical therapy there. And I got started working in there. It was happened to be on the reservation in Arizona, actually. So there's very unique population, very unique circumstances. And I found I really liked it. And I happened to then get injured myself, which is how many of us get into the field. And through a sports injury, had to go to physical therapy and then become a patient myself and learned to love it even more, and decided from that point moving forward of college sports aren't an option, but physical therapy feels like I get to integrate with athletes and different people who care about health. And that seems like a good avenue. And I continued pursuing it after high school.
Awesome. That's so cool. I really appreciate how, for a lot of people that we've been interviewing in these series, there's a really big personal connection, like something happened in your life. The previous person we interviewed, he kind of struggled to figure out what he wanted health and wellness to look like for himself. And that's how he kind of got into that. So thanks for sharing that story a little bit of how you got into this. So you mentioned that your day is kind of like a typical 9 to 5. Could you possibly elaborate more on what sorts of things you're doing during your day? Like with
Yes.
patients and stuff?
Yeah, of course. So in my location as a physical therapist, I get to generate what's called the plan of care for patients. So when you come to see me, you have some type of ailment, and I do all sorts of fancy assessments, run through things, and based on that, I figure out what in your everyday life are you struggling to accomplish that I can work to help improve. So say there's a lot of delivery truck drivers out right now because of the pandemic that we're in. And so if they're hurt their back and they can't lift boxes, that's really pertinent to their everyday life and their job and all of that. So that's where I would create those goals and make them very specific to their life, set that up, and then check in occasionally. And it's continuous assessments and running through and making sure that they're making progress and making tweaks accordingly. And that's pretty much my day. I see roughly, in the setting I'm in, I see roughly about 8 patients a day for usually about an hour, which would make an 8-hour day. Sometimes having meetings, I get to integrate with physicians, I get to chat with nurses, all different healthcare specialists in my setting, which is very nice. They're right there. I could go and collaborate with them. And yeah, it's a lot of hands-on stuff too. So it's not all computer work. The assessments and creating that document sounds like it, but it's a lot of hands-on focus.
Okay, that's helpful. That explains a lot, and I really like how, the work that you're doing is very individualized, like you said, to the person, and you kind of help them through that. So that's really really cool. Could you tell us a little bit more on the health and wellness coaching side of things? That's what you said, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that really is the beautiful part, is it's naturally integrated into healthcare. It's something big that all professions are working on. And what is a more common term you hear out in the internet and world is patient-centered care, of putting the patient first, making sure they're getting proper care. And when you dive into that, it comes down to communication. And that's what health wellness coaching is really doing, is putting the patient first and helping be their coach along this journey that they, for most, didn't plan to take. You don't plan to get injured. You don't plan to have a heart attack, these types of things. So it's there to act as a supportive communicator along the process, but not to the depth of psychology or different things, because they use more advanced tools. This is literally your support system to guide you along the way who has some health background.
That's awesome. I'm pretty curious about, you mentioned that people come in when they have injuries. Is that like the only time people come in? Or I know you kind of mentioned like the truck drivers too, but what are some other situations where people come in where it's not necessarily like injury related?
Yeah, so not in my current setting, but say those in what's called outpatient physical therapy clinics. Those are the ones you'll probably see in the outlet malls if you're driving to your Target or other convenience store. And for most states, anyone else could walk in off the street and go into that clinic. And usually it's for some type of issue that you're having. You're not moving like you normally are. You could even be wanting to get into skiing and don't feel ready, don't feel safe. And we can take a look and say, oh, this muscle is really weak. It might put you at a greater risk for injury. So here's some different things. So it's usually when there's something, you feel like something's off with your body, but it doesn't have to be.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Thanks for explaining that because I was a little bit confused at first, but that makes a lot of sense too. Because you'll probably, I mean, I notice it sometimes in me myself because I'm sitting at a desk all the time, and my shoulders, my back are just like so tense. But I'm also curious to know, what do you find as like, what's your favorite thing about your job and the work that you do, and also what's your least favorite thing about what you do,
Mm.
if you have any.
Yeah. I would say my favorite thing is definitely I love to talk, and no matter what setting you're in as a physical therapist, you're most likely with the individual for at least 30 minutes. And it's amazing what that connection can do, knowing that you're there to help that individual. And when they recognize that, just the bond it forms. And I think that's my favorite part. I think my least favorite part is a more systemic issue of healthcare limitations and things like that that you never want to think about as a patient needing to use the healthcare system. But sometimes that gets in the way. And even though I want to treat you for 30 more minutes or have you be able to see me for 2 more visits, we can't because of that limitation. And that's probably my least favorite part about it. But there's not much you can do at this current time other than continuing to be involved in the political system and try to make changes via that way.
Yeah. That's awesome. I'm glad that you mentioned that at the end about being in the political system, because even for me right now, my favorite part of my work is getting to work with students. But some of the harder parts is kind of like jumping over those systemic barriers. But, we can continue to advocate, reach out to whoever we need to reach out to, and make sure that processes and systems are, continuously evolving to be inclusive to everyone. Could you possibly describe the maybe training and education that's needed for this type of work, and maybe a little bit about your own educational journey?
Of course. So in general, I usually tell people, like my patients, that it's 7 years of schooling because in order to get into a doctor of physical therapy program, you have to have a bachelor's degree. The great part is you can have a bachelor's degree of any background. I know my classmates, there was a dance major, communications major, all sorts of things that they're coming back to do a second career change. And then once you finish your bachelor's, you then go on to the doctorate program, and it's about 2.5, some maybe 3 years. There's also some new hybrid ones because of the world we're in and doing the online. So I believe the longest is about 3 years with then shorter options. And me personally, I actually went to undergraduate in Flagstaff, and I got a bachelor's of exercise science there. And then that's where I studied chemistry and health wellness coaching as well. And then I moved to Denver, Colorado, and I went to the physical therapy program it's the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus is where they have all their health professions. And that's where I went ahead and got my doctoral degree.
I'm sorry, you cut out on my end a little bit, so I didn't hear the part about your graduate studies, like where you did that.
Oh, yeah. It was, I moved out to Denver, and it's the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus is where they have all of their health professions. And so that's where I got my doctoral degree from.
Oh, okay, good. It like went staticky for a while. I was like, no.
Oh, no.
That's awesome. And I really like the part about, your cohort members or your classmates having their bachelor's in like a wide variety of different degrees and stuff, which is something we try to explain to students as well, is that like, maybe you can start on one path and end somewhere completely different that you didn't even think of. Yeah. But I think that's awesome. What's something that's kind of like stood out to you from your education that you typically or maybe mostly apply to the work that you're doing?
Okay. And a real quick even follow-up for the different careers is, I know my school in particular, they really appreciate the differentiation because it helps make you into a more well-rounded individual. And as long as you get those prerequisites to apply for the program, now they go, hey, this person has a marketing background. That might help them then when they're out looking for a job in some other fashion as a physical therapist. So definitely, it's nice that the profession allows for that.
Right.
I think the most beneficial, the thing I carry with me from my school, like my teachings in the school, is, gosh, I can go so many different ways, but I think it really comes down to the communication piece and how much it it just be there and be present with the individual, be personable, because you're dealing with some type of health situation that the person is likely uncomfortable for some reason. And just knowing that you're there and showing that you're empathetic with it, and that them really kind of honing that in of just be there with the person, I think is the most profound. And I teach all of my students that in the clinic too, of we're never going to have all the answers. Someone's going to stump me with some diagnosis that I don't recognize, but if I just show that I'm feeling their struggle and that we're together and this is going to work through it, then that helps them so much more. And so I think I carry that with me the most, that they taught us in the schooling.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And like you mentioned earlier, it's the whole aspect of being really, patient or client centered and being there with them and, supporting them through it, but also working as a team with the patient, because we don't always have all the answers, the person probably knows their body the best. So that's awesome. Did you by chance work while you were in college or working on your degrees?
I did. I worked through undergraduate and graduate school. So
yeah. Can you tell us more about what you did?
Yeah, in undergraduate, I excuse me, I worked as a server in a restaurant part-time. I believe I averaged usually around 20 hours a week while maintaining a full caseload or course. I don't remember what the standard coursework for a full thing is, but
15 credits.
I think something. Yeah, I think every major is different. I don't quite remember, but I carried that fully and then worked, and it really came down to time management for that. If I wasn't good with my time management skills and prioritizing my schooling, I definitely wouldn't have worked that much in that type of job because it can be late hours. But then because I'm accustomed to that, I've been working in a restaurant since I was 16. I carried that through graduate school, and I did about 20 to 25 hours a week during graduate school. And in graduate school, you go 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So you're in class 40 hours a week, and then you're studying on top of that. And it's not something that they recommend to the average student, but I know myself, and I know that works well for me. And so I continued working in the restaurants through graduate school, and that helped me financially, that helped me mentally, everything that I need to do. It was good for me. And that's why I chose to do it.
Yeah. So it's all about kind of finding what works for you, what your balance looks like. And like you said, really managing your time. I'm currently in graduate school right now, and I work 2 jobs, internships, all these other things in my life. And it's really, really important that, I time manage. But thanks so much for sharing. As we kind of move towards wrapping up a little bit, what are some things that you would share with a high school student that they can do right now to prepare them for this career?
I would say if you haven't needed to see a physical therapist before, which cross your fingers that you don't, I would say just get in the door, go find some. It's amazing how if you ask around in your community, there's a good chance that a family member, friends, someone knows a physical therapist in some setting, and ask to observe them. I know so many of us love having people. It helps expand our profession, get the word out there. And if you're thinking about it, that's all you need to do is reach out and ask, and you can more than willingly observe them and see if it's something you're actually interested in when you get to be there for a work day and see all the ins and outs.
Awesome. Thank you. Would you say that's your biggest advice to high school students, or would you have a different advice? It's okay if it's the same.
I think that would be one of the biggest, because it is a big financial commitment and time commitment, to where if you're not 100% certain that you want to pursue it, you don't want to have that issue arise. But in general, the other thing too is grades do matter. So it's like, if you're someone who's not prioritizing that, you got to, put that first before you move on. But I think definitely getting your foot in the door and seeing if it's actually something you're interested in, knowing that there is a big financial cloud that's there that you'd have to take on. You want to be passionate about it, and you want to know that it's the thing for you.
Agree. That's really important. And shadowing is something that we also, our actual last speaker also talked about shadowing for going into physical therapy, because he's currently in school to become a doctor of physical therapy. So you also mentioned something that makes me want to backtrack just a little bit, because I'm curious now. You talked about this kind of profession, career field being a really big financial, thing to take on. Could you talk a little bit about what the salary range for this type of job or this type of work is like?
Yeah, that's it. First of all, it varies state to state, just with anything else because of living and all of that. In general, I would say going across state borders, you would have at the bottom 60,000 a year, and at the top just surpassing 100K a year. And that really, so it depends on location, it depends on experience, it depends on even the setting in which you're doing. You can be a travel physical therapist and work 3-month contracts in California, and the next 3 months are spent in Oregon and things like that. So there's a lot of different options, and that's why I always say, like, get your foot in the door somewhere, because somewhere you don't think you'd find a physical therapist, I bet there's a physical therapist working in that type of atmosphere. But yeah, I would say more commonly, you probably are the 60,000 to 90,000. But it is highly variable on region. I know Arizona pays more than Colorado.
Okay, cool. Thank you. That's good to know. A lot of students, obviously, the financials of going into college are like a really big burden for them. But sometimes it might help sharing like what the outlook might look like when it comes to salary, because you're putting in all these years of school to do all this work, but you should also be getting paid at a price that matches the work that you're giving. So, but yeah, that's kind of all we have today. Thank you again so much, Dr. Stauffer, for sitting down, chatting with us, and answering some questions. This is really helpful to, just our general community, our high school students who are just kind of exploring the different options that are out there for careers. So thank you so much.
Of course, thank you for having me. I really appreciate this, and I hope it helps some individuals make some decisions in their future.
Awesome. Thank you.